I would start replacing the word fail with learn, or failing with learning. And I think that's the thing for me. One of the things that people know me for is resilience. I will always find a way, no matter the barrier, I will find a way. Or if this way isn't working for me, I will create my own way. So I think in terms of failure, I think we need to change the conversation around failure.
From Caribbean Ideas in Trinidad and Tobago, this is UpTick, a part of the Caribbean Innovation Content Network. UpTick is a show that brings you the stories of Caribbean entrepreneurs and corporate innovators that are building the next generation of great companies. These are the stories you don't typically hear of how these leaders are working to build brands and businesses that can not only impact the Caribbean world, but also have an impact on the global business stage. Their stories will move you, inspire you, push you to take action, and perhaps spark your next big idea. I'm your host, Chike Farrell. I'm always interested in understanding what leads to greatness, how people from all around the world, but especially in the Caribbean, build the belief that they can impact the world. What's interesting is that things often don't start off with such a grandiose idea. In fact, great ideas often just start with being curious about something and then following the trail of your curiosity to an insight. Now, in an earlier episode this season, Ron Johnson of Blueprint Creative mentioned the work that Dr. Rochelle Haines of Crowd Potential Consulting has been doing. And as I learned more about her work, I knew we had to add her to this season's roster. Rochelle and her business partners have the copyright around a set of frameworks related to the idea of GigHR, and they're some of the leading thinkers on a hugely important area, how organizations and people can think about designing their operations to adapt to the gig economy. In just the United States in 2018, it was estimated that 36% of workers were involved in the gig economy, and that US freelancers contributed $1.2 trillion to the economy. That's right. In 2018, well before the pandemic. So if that was the case before, post-pandemic organizations worldwide have got to have a plan for how to contend with this evolving space. Like all the stories we explore in this podcast, what I love is that Rochelle is acutely aware that ideas alone aren't enough if you don't have the perseverance to follow them through and the belief in yourself that no matter where you're from, even if you're from the smallest island, that if your idea is big enough and your commitment strong enough, that the world will come calling. Have a listen and learn from Dr. Haynes. I know you'll enjoy her mix of thoughtfulness, humility, and drive. All right. Well, it's a very exciting day on season 2 of the UpTick podcast. I'm really excited to have a conversation today with Dr. Rochelle Haines, who I've gotten to know recently and is doing some really exciting things. So I know this is going to be a great conversation. So welcome, Rochelle. Great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, no, this is going to be good. I mean, you've been flying the flag and representing for the Caribbean in a lot of interesting ways. And I think, the listeners out there are going to really enjoy learning about what you're doing and some of the things that you've, learned along the way. So, why don't we start, let's get folks introduced to you. So tell us where you're from, both not the country, but also not just the country, but also where in the country, let's get people understanding where you are from on the Caribbean map.
Yeah, so I am from Barbados, and originally, born in St. Michael, born and raised half in St. Michael, and then in St. George. So I grew up most of a country bumpkin for most of my life. So I was in Barbados till about age 24, and then I moved to the UK. So I've been in the UK for the last 11 years, but I'm currently working remotely from Barbados. So back home. It's nice to be back home.
I know I am still very envious of you. We've been talking, and it's been winter in the US, in Seattle, and I know I remember joking around the last time we chatted. I could see some glimmers of sun through the window. And I was like, oh, I know exactly what goodness is on the other side of that. So
I'm very happy to escape winter this year. Yeah, I think I'm going back right in time for spring. So no complaints here at all.
That was a power move on your part. That was definitely a power move. Well, I think one of the things that we're going to get into a lot more is some of the work that you've been doing around gigs, gig economy, GigHR, and that sort of thing. But tell us a little bit about your career path and your career journey. So as you said, you grew up in Barbados, and then you ended up in the UK. But tell us a little bit about the key stops on the journey and what you're doing now.
So originally, I wanted to be a child psychologist, and I studied psychology at UE, at University of the West Indies. And then, because there weren't a lot of psychology internships in Barbados, I opted to teach at a primary school for 2 years to get the experience of working with kids. But as I was saying to you in a previous conversation, 8 hours in a classroom with 30 kids made me realize very quickly that it wasn't for me. Kudos to all primary school teachers out there. But following that, I worked with a trust corporation, a Canadian bank and trust. And while I was there, I had to do a lot of work and liaising with international clients. And during that time, I got along well with these clients. It was impacting our business for the good, that particular business positively. So then I got approached by the CEO to help them to open and run an HR department within the bank. But at the time, HR was still very new to me. And also they wanted me to stay and they would pay for me to study. And then I would run it after I run the department. But my issue with that is I love to travel. So I didn't want to be pinned down in one location. I was 22 and I thought, no, I got a lot of the world to see. So I told them, thank you, but no, thank you. And then because of that, after that, to me, there was not much direction left for me in the company. So I opted to quit and to go overseas and pursue a master's in HR. So that's how I really got on the HR specific path. I would say the inspiration came from them. But also, while I was abroad, I did well on the master's. I got an offer to do a PhD scholarship in international HR. And that's where came the interest in, let's say, remote work, expatriates, working abroad, as I myself was working abroad. So following that, that's how I got into academia, because as you know, I'm a senior lecturer as well. But on top of that, I also did consulting work alongside studying the PhD and teaching. So then from there, once the PhD was finished, I thought, okay, well, consulting is something I want to pursue full time. One, because I like working on different things. So consulting allows me to work on different projects and engage with different people at different times. So I'm very opposed to a 9-to-5 position. And to me, consulting was it for me. So I signed my company. I launched my company. And then from there, I really got into the full-time, well, not full-time in terms of running the company. It's kind of like I have two full-times. I still have my job. But I also have the company as well.
Yeah, well, so tell folks the name of your company.
It's Crowd Potential Consulting Inc.
Great. Yeah, and we're definitely gonna go a little bit deeper on that. But I think what's interesting is, well, in addition to swapping, teaching the primary school folks for teaching folks who are a little bit older, even though my father was a lifelong lecturer, and so I'm not sure if there's material differences. Hopefully there are material differences. Sometimes us, university students, we could be like primary school children too sometimes, and when we're in the wrong mood. But I think, as you mentioned, you kind of really uncovered this thread, and you've been kind of pulling on it in terms of, okay, first there's HR, then there's sort of modern work and how that's going to evolve and what that means for organizations and so on. And I think one of the things that's really fascinating about your work is that you've gone on to actually trademark some of these concepts. So tell us a little bit more about what you've trademarked and that concept.
Okay, so the concept that I trademarked is called GigHR, and that is based on a study that we did. We released the white paper on that study in 2020, but the study started really in 2018, the end of 2018. And during that time, I was very much interested in how the world of work was changing. I guess seeing it from the academic side, I know all the theories of work, all the theories of management and HR and people management. But yet in industry and through consulting, often I found what I was experiencing was very different, and how I opted to work felt very different. But there was no real literature that I was seeing representing that. So I thought, okay, it'll be really interesting to do a study on how the world of work is changing and whether or not our people management strategies are suitable for these changes. So then I did this global study where I partnered with Jeremy Blaine from Performance Works International. And what we did was that we did more than 2,000 interviews and surveys with different companies across the globe. And we were asking them about how their world of work is changing, but we were also speaking to employees and digital nomads, so those who work from anywhere in the world or keep traveling. So then our study, one of the things that our study revealed was that the world was moving towards more independent contract, remote type work. But yet companies were still trying to manage in a very full-time 9 to 5 way. And because of that, we were seeing a clash, and companies they were saying that they weren't prepared, and these were the problems that they were having managing this new type of work. So then based on that study, we released a white paper in February 2020 saying businesses aren't ready for remote work, they aren't ready for the new world of work, and so forth, and this is what they need to do. And we published also our GigHR framework. And what that framework did, or what it spoke about, was how companies need to revamp their policies and their environment and the way in which they engage with workers that suits just more than one type of worker. So we published that in 2020, February 2020. And as you know, the world went on lockdown in March.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say that, folks listening might have kind of heard that date and it kind of registered, but like, I want to kind of come back to it. It's like, we published this study in March of 2020, just when pretty much all around the world, things were coming to a major stop. And here are companies now starting to say, what do we do? How do we adapt? And here you have this study that's talking about even sort of outside of pandemic life. This is the way that the world is going. So what was the reaction to that? What happened as a result of that for one of your jobs?
It's funny. It really impacted both of them. On the consulting side, we started getting a lot of phone calls for public speaking events and for webinars on master classes on how to manage a company remotely, how to engage remote workers, how to actually set up your organization digitally for remote work. And then on the lecturing side, it was the same as well. I started, for example, the chartered body CIPD, was chartered body for HR, across the globe, particularly in the UK, headquartered in the UK, but across the globe, they reached out and they said, hey, can you speak on this panel about gig workers? So that was last June. And since then, it's still been going. It's still been a nonstop process of providing solutions for organizations. But it's been very interesting. It's not just solutions for organizations, but also solutions. We've been contacted also by governments. Because what's happened as well is that a lot of countries have started pursuing remote work welcome stamps, making it easier, visas that make it easier for digital nomads to come and work in their country for, let's say, a longer period of time. So since then, a lot of countries in doing that have realized that while we're inviting these digital nomads here, do we actually have everything that they need? So then that's resulted in more work as well. So it's been a very busy period.
Absolutely. And that's actually kind of an interesting topic because kind of around the region, Barbados got a lot of kudos for creating its welcome stamp program and sort of saying, look, you know what, you're a country that's very dependent on tourism and it's ground to a halt and finding a way to do that. But I know that a funny story on that is that, you've been talking about this for some time, years now.
Yeah.
And there was certainly a point pre-pandemic when people were like, no, this could never work. And they had to sort of realize, wait a minute, we were wrong and you were right?
Yeah, that was an interesting point because it was a funny day because my sister I did a conference in 2019. I did a conference in 2019, November. And at the conference, there was an interview after in the local newspaper in Barbados that highlighted what I was saying at the conference. And what I was basically saying is that we should encourage and embrace remote work and other forms of work in the Caribbean as well. And following that, my sister sent me a message 2 days later saying that this very popular radio host was saying that I was out of touch with the Caribbean. This will never work. This won't happen. And yeah, it was just a bit funny then because when at the time I reacted very funny to it, I said, that person criticized me? Wow, I've made it. If that person knows my name, I've made it. So it was funny. It was a joke between us at the time. But then to realize then February, March when it came around, and then everyone started calling and asking questions. Yeah, it was a bit vindicating considering that initial reaction.
So I want to kind of go in terms of influences on the path. One of the things I'm always interested in as I talk to Caribbean innovators and people who are pushing the envelope and so on is, what were some of the influences? And in your case, as you said, you had these two paths where you're a lecturer, and now you're managing a business at the same time. Did you have, particular people in your life when you were younger that either were entrepreneurial and that you were looking at, or who were some of the influences that you kind of, look back on?
It's very interesting because, for example, my dad is the type of person that he always tries new stuff. So one time he had a construction firm, the other time he had a gym and a martial arts academy, another time he had, what else? I've forgotten all of them. I think I might have called them out. A video store back to the day when video was still a thing.
Right.
So he was the person that he was always trying different entrepreneurial stuff. I would say in later years, it was really around persons really that pushed me was my aunt, and also a good friend of mine, Chris, because what he did was to show me different ways of pursuing things. Because I'm not a person that came from a background with a lot of money. So one of the things that my friend Chris showed me, and he was always very much a go-getter, very much of, I'm going to find a way to make this happen. And one of the things he showed me was how to make things happen when one door was closed. He said, yeah, okay, you're worried about doing this thing. You say you can't afford it here. Here's the avenues that you can use to gain the funds you need to support this activity. So that was quite useful. My aunt was very useful in terms of just encouraging me, one, to go abroad and have new experiences and not to limit myself. So that was pretty impactful as well. And then I remember there was a businessman I was in touch with ages ago, and I was telling him I was about 18, I was telling him all the things I wanted to do when I finished university. And I was saying to him, but I'm not sure if I can do them because I don't know if I have enough money. And he said, you know what, forget that. Forget money. Don't let money be your objective. Let the thing be your objective, and then money will come. And I never forgot that. And I've seen that time and time again. So even like when I started the research project, I thought, well, this is a global project. How am I going to fund this? But one of the things that was really inspiring to me, especially when I got into entrepreneurship, was to see the amount of people that when you put your vision out there, when you risk it and put your ideas and you start to pursue that out there, you'll be amazed at the amount of people that come alongside you to support you. And there were so many people where I thought I would be really competing against massive, large businesses. So many people said, hey, you're doing this? That's great. I'm going to put you in touch with this person who would really help you on this. And I'm going to put you in touch with this person. Because that's how I got in touch with my business partner. I was working with another consultant. She put me in touch with, after we worked on a project, she said, I have another person that would be great for you to work with. And she put me in touch with him. And he funded the research that we did to the tune of thousands of dollars, thousands of pounds. So things like that have been really inspirational. People like that have been really inspirational. The ones that really push you to do things regardless of the barriers that present themselves.
Yeah, I love that on so many levels. One of the things that UpTick is really all about is, I just wanted people to hear more of the stories of people who are kind of trying to push the Caribbean forward, push the world forward, etc. And one of the things that I always believe in pretty fervently is that you're gonna have to have an attitude or an approach that, what, obstacles are gonna come. They're definitely gonna come, and you gotta find ways. Do I dig underneath it? Do I go around it, on the side, or climb over it? How do you kind of build that? And in fact, that's one of the themes of this season. There's sort of 3 P's that we're focusing on: perseverance, pivots, and purpose. And you kind of touched on both of them in what you just shared. You talked about sharing your idea, sharing what you're trying to do, and when you take that risk and put it out there, that sometimes good things can happen. So tell us a little bit about your larger mission and purpose at this point.
Yeah. So I call myself a good work advocate. And what that really means is that I want people to have a very positive experience of work. And I see that in different ways. Our experience of work should not just be dictated by the organization that we're working for at the time. I think there's so many different experiences of work and so many ways in which people work well. And I would really like to see, particularly in the Caribbean, for those ways of working, different ways of working to be embraced. The other thing I would really like to see is persons really pursuing and fulfilling their entrepreneurial passion and mission, but on a global scale. So one of the things I think in the Caribbean that we often struggle with is the implementation of our innovative ideas. We have a lot of great ideas, but in terms of converting those ideas to products, I think we've always been a bit slow on. So one of the things that I'm very keen to see, especially where we're talking about gig workers, the remote world, and people traveling to Barbados to work, I really want to see an increased knowledge exchange that would result and would help in helping us to convert some of those ideas into products. But I think it's not just dependent on people coming to Barbados and sharing knowledge with us. We have in the Caribbean, we have a lot of brilliant minds ourselves. So I think in terms of, I'm very interested in harnessing those ideas or teaching people, or let me say, facilitating the process of harnessing those ideas and making those visions a reality. And I think that starts at a very young age. I think it starts with a review of our educational system. I think our educational system is still very much vamped towards teaching individuals to get a job rather than teaching individuals to create jobs. So I think that in terms of my overall vision, that's my mission. And I think that's where in the Caribbean we still have a lot of work to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I always think about is that we are great in the Caribbean. We have brilliant people, great energy, great vibrancy.
Yeah.
Sometimes we say we're great at producing, as you said, people who, doctors and lawyers, and they're kind of trained to get a job, but people are sometimes afraid to fail.
Yeah.
To be seen as a failure or to take a risk or to create. So how have you specifically internalized the risks of entrepreneurship? Connected it to your approach so that folks who are listening, who might want to do something, have an idea, but be worried about it. How do you sort of approach things like that, approach risk, approach quote unquote failure? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would start replacing the word fail with learn, or failing with learning. And I think that's the thing for me. One of the things that people know me for is resilience. I will always find a way, no matter the barrier, I will find a way. Or if this way isn't working for me, I will create my own way. So I think in terms of failure, I think we need to change the conversation around failure. And also is still going back and very influenced by our educational system, where we're very much taught constantly about success, the importance of success, making sure you pass and do well in the common entrance. And if you haven't done well in the common entrance, then you are going to these particular schools, which give the impression of failure. We have this stigma around these one set of schools are better than the other set of schools. So I think our conversation around success and failure needs to change. When you look at a lot of great entrepreneurs out there, you have situations where in their childhood, failure was encouraged because they were taught something from the process. And if this didn't work, it was about, okay, what did you gain from that experience? And how do you apply it to the next experience? Okay, now that experience, you failed the second time, but you're a bit further than you were the first time. So what can you take from here and then still keep on your goal? So one of the best things someone told me was, I remember I went to a conference once and I was presenting a paper in a journal workshop. And the editors, they were giving me feedback, one-to-one feedback, and they were really harsh on my paper. They were like, I don't think you have anything really here. I think you need to go back to the drawing board, yada, yada, yada. And I said, well, in the end, as they were going on, I said, thank you for that. And thank you for telling me that, because I would have gone and presented absolute rubbish in this session. And they said, listen, don't see your work as rubbish. But they said, this guy that I looked up to as an expert in this particular field, he said to me, you know what, I can cover the 4 walls of my bedroom with all the rejection letters that I've ever received. But he said, see your paper as your first draft, as a prototype. You do that first draft, or you do that first project, you get feedback on that. You use that to make the second prototype better. And then you get feedback on that. Maybe it doesn't work on, but you're closer because now you're going to use it to improve prototype 3. And that's how you kind of develop. So failure is part of the process. And as long as we demonize failure, and as long as we run from failure, we're not really going to achieve the success that we're looking for.
Yeah, and it's funny. I love to ask a question about failure on the podcast because without ever putting anybody up to it, unfailingly, pretty much everybody says, "What do you mean fail? It's not failure. It's learning. It's trying. It's something to grow." And I think that is one of the overriding messages because you have to be, able to persevere. You are gonna to have obstacles. You're gonna have things that you're gonna want to maybe fold up and go away. And so figuring out an approach where you see it in a different light is really so important. So important.
Yeah, we need to change the conversations, I think, that we're having in schools, change the conversations that we're having among our friends, and stop demonizing failure. No one's a failure. We try and we go again. But I think along the process, it's really important, too, to stop and think, okay, stop and have some reflection time before just straight jumping into the other thing, because you really want to learn from the process. And even on my the entrepreneurial journey, things are going well now. But there were a lot of soft failures I had along the way. I remember where once I was contacted by this large organization who wanted to know more about my GigHR framework. And my friend put me in touch with this organization. She works there. It's a world-renowned organization. And they asked me for a session on my framework because they want to use it in their company. And I went and I did that session for free. And my colleague came back to me. She said, "How did the session go?" I said, "It went really well. They seemed really grateful and everything. Everyone was really happy." And she said, "Okay, so you got paid, right?" I said, "What, pay?" She said, "You didn't get paid?" She said, "Rochelle, every presenter was paid. Why weren't you paid? Why didn't you ask for payment? Didn't you give an invoice?" So I had moments like that. I had moments where I reached out to some people for collaboration, and then I didn't hear from them again. And then someone sent me screenshots of them posting my ideas elsewhere and making money from them, But in each of those things, they have helped me know because I know that I will do those things differently. So
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. That's so important. So if we talk a little bit about adapting, learning, and then trying something different, give us an example of probably the biggest change that you've made to your business model or your business approach and strategy as a result of something that you observed.
I would say the biggest thing that I have learned is saying no. And that sounds very strange to say, I guess. But one of the things I started out doing was, when I started consulting, was saying yes, because I was very young in the field. And I was worried that other persons had a lot more experience than I did. So I just wanted to learn. I said, I'll take every opportunity that comes my way. And what I found was, one, I gave a lot of stuff for free, which is fine. I don't mind that because it's more about the vision. But then there's a point where you approach burnout. And at the end of the day, you still got to provide for yourself. So very early on, my mistake was saying yes to everything. And I ended up being very operational, and my business wasn't really growing. So then now my motto is kind of be more strategic in my decisions, know the power of no. And it's not necessarily that I'm being harsh, but if I want to be able to help the multitude of people that I say I want to help, then I got to be able to take care of myself as well, take care of my well-being, but also making sure that I can further the larger vision rather than, let's say, just grabbing at every single thing that comes my way, but does not necessarily funnel into that vision.
That's great. I think I wanted to explore in another area kind of related to your experience with GigHR, both individually and then some of the advice you give other people. So one of the things that's interesting about you is, as you said, you have two jobs, right?
Yeah.
Which resonates with me because I do as well. And that can be tricky to manage. And there's lots of people who, have their side hustle. How do you approach the balance? How do you make that work?
So this was a very interesting experience for me because especially with social media. And I think it's a wider social media conversation there as well. I tend to use my LinkedIn a lot for consulting, primarily for consulting, for example. And one of the things I found, I used to consult before my most recent, because I've worked at more than one university before. I'm at a new university. I've been at one for the last 2 years. And now universities, when I first started 8 years ago, universities weren't very keen on using LinkedIn and social media. But now I found as the years have passed, they are. So I was already a consultant. I already had my own company when I came to the university. But then sometimes there were these clashes in terms of the expectations of my full-time job for my social media and my own expectations. So I had to have a conversation with my boss around that in my full-time position about some of the things that I was posting and how my social media was being used. So then what I did in the end was separated it out. I decided that I'm going to remove all contacts from my LinkedIn of my full-time post, and that I will use Twitter for that space instead if I want to liaise with my full-time colleagues. So I try to balance it in that way. In terms of time is probably the trickiest factor. But to be fair, I'm in academia, and because of that, we do get a lot more, let's say, holiday time, a lot more vacation time than most people. So in that way, that has been very suitable to what I do. At the same time, what I do complements academia as well, complements my full time. So I've had less conflicts because of that. So for example, my work was recently published in a Forbes article, and my university found out about that. I let them know about that, and that helps in terms of their exposure. So that's been kind of celebrated within my full-time job. They're writing additional posts on it and that sort of thing. So in that way, when one starts to complement the other, I'm very lucky. I know other people don't have that experience, especially if they're doing completely opposite things. I think I'm very lucky in that the consulting facilitates my full-time as well. For example, also getting guest lecturers. Sometimes I would go to some of my consulting colleagues and say, hey, do you want to give a guest lecture for this subject? So that's how I've been learning to balance it. But if I'm truly honest, that's still an ongoing sort of tread carefully sort of ground.
It is tricky, but it's good to hear that you found some ways to navigate and kind of make those two match. We've been going through a period where, there's a lot of dialogue about diversity, representation, equal opportunity. Have you found as, a Caribbean woman kind of making your way in this space, has that been an advantage? Have there been challenges? I'm kind of curious what your experience has been and how you've been navigating.
Do you mean in the entrepreneurial space or both the full-time and entrepreneurial?
Well, I guess primarily in the entrepreneurial space where you're kind of trying to land this framework that there's all these people who are interested in, and there's all these people who have theories around it, and there are lots of different ways to land it. I'm kind of interested in that side.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think I've seen the good and the bad of it. I think one of the things I used to get really challenged a lot on my age. So for example, I go into a session and I would be doing a leadership training workshop. And in the middle of the workshop, I would see some whispering. And then they would raise their hands, and it's like they've all unanimously decided to come to me and ask me my age. So it's like, that used to be a bit off-putting. The other issue around that I used to have was that often people didn't want to pay as a result. So there was an issue. I think it wasn't just the age, but I think it was the female side of things as well. So I've been very fortunate in that my business partner is also my mentor, and he's very experienced in the field and so forth. And one of the things that he's taught me is about being more direct and putting my foot down about a lot of things. So I think that sort of mentorship has helped. But I do think female entrepreneurs do have certain barriers that they face in that regard. In terms of the positive side, one of the things that I was told when I started consulting in England by some colleagues as well as clients was that, you are very unique and you need to use that uniqueness. My German colleague gave me the example of when someone in a workshop said to her, you're a German consultant within the UK, and use your Germanness. And I was surprised when she said it. But then she was making the point to me, you're a Caribbean female in the UK, you're doing something new and very different. But she was saying to me, use your uniqueness. Don't try to hide that. That can be your strength in the entrepreneurial sector. So I think one of the things I used to try to do in the past was to conform to what I thought people thought was professional, or what I thought people wanted to hear or wanted to see from a consultant. Whereas where I started being just my pure self within the sessions, where maybe I'm a bit jokey at times, maybe I'm a bit more casual at times, whatever the case might be. And I'm not saying this is unique to every Caribbean person, but in terms of my own personality, where I stopped trying to hide who I was and presenting what I thought people wanted, then that really started to make a difference. So I've had a lot of sessions where people, after they followed up and they said, I really like your spirit. I really like the spirit of that session. That session was really engaging. I really like how you're your natural this. And to me, I've found that has been the strength in the work that I do when it comes to presenting. So it's been a bit of good and bad.
Yeah, I love that. And it is really important, as you said, to kind of find ways. Like, I love that you mentioned kind of being more direct, which, I think is a universal thing, right? Yeah. Knowing your worth is a universal thing that everybody in every situation, entrepreneurial, corporate, public sector, whatever, you have to build that appreciation, and it takes time, which I think, we all have to kind of go on that journey. Tell me something, Rochelle, like who inspires you? You talked about mentorship just now, which is really great. That's always one of the things that I ask about. But beyond kind of the folks that you have direct access to, who inspires you from a business or education or professorial standpoint?
A number of people. Let me count. In terms of a professorial standpoint, I was very fortunate to, like, the university that I am at right now, one of the pulls to be there was that my immediate supervisor at the time was this expert, world-renowned person in the area of performance management. So that was very inspiring to want to be better in terms of the knowledge, possessing the knowledge and being the expert in this area, because I really looked up to her. Unfortunately, she retired probably about a year after I joined, but she was really sort of inspiring to just want to be the best I could be in a particular area. In terms of, I do follow a lot of people in terms of thought leaders.
Anybody particular kind of come to mind that you try to model after in any particular ways?
I think mine are quite cliche and traditional in that sense. I really like Simon Sinek, and where he says start with why, and that I find very inspiring, because when I first started out my consultancy, I was like, okay, I just want to make money. I just want to have a global consultancy that lets me work anywhere in the world and make money. And then I started thinking, okay, but what do I want to make money to do? What's the point? What type of product do I want to create or service? How will it help people? And then I started to try to align who I was with what I wanted to do. So that was particularly important for me. There are quite a few other people. It's hard to.
No, well, actually, I would say that build on Simon Sinek, because he's actually one that that I love that you mentioned him, and I always like to use the podcast to share names and, hey, go read this book, and who people kind of paying attention to. But Simon Sinek, to start with why, has been a big influence for myself and my co-founder at Caribbean Ideas, and we've certainly adapted over the years how we try to articulate, how we try to talk about it, and that is a big influence. So I think that's a really powerful one. How do you approach balance? You're very busy. You got lots of stuff going on. How do you try to keep yourself centered? Or do you do yoga? Do you do meditation? And what are the ways that you try to attack that?
The main thing for me tends to be working out or to be in nature. I love nature. I love anything outdoors. When I was in the UK, because I'll be back there in 6 weeks, but when I was in the UK, especially during lockdown, I would go for a lot of really long bike rides, a lot of walks, a lot of runs. I play tennis with friends of mine. So anything outdoors and active, I love CrossFit. I love anything with weights and throwing stuff around. Yeah. But I think in terms of like clearing my head, I think just being out in nature. So I try like every Saturday morning, for example, to go for a run or go for a cross country walk and try to discover something new.
Awesome. Yeah. I always want to kind of, and it's doubly important, in kind of living through a pandemic, but it's also important just in life to try to find some sort of balance,
Absolutely.
Super, super important. So I want to explore for all those people out there who heard you say digital nomad and, they want to get their side hustle on, but they also want to take it on the road. What are some of the ways that you've advised people for how to kind of manage that and achieve that?
Yeah, I would say one of the things you have to have is a very clear focus because it's not easy. I mean, we see a lot of these images of people traveling from Bali to this place to that place, and it looks very glamorous. So when people hear, oh, you're working from Barbados, it looks very glamorous. But the truth is, it's a lot of work. It's very intense. And if you don't keep your focus on what you're doing and make time for that and make time to plan for that, then you're going to get sidetracked either by the distractions in the location, or you might just get tired and fed up. One of the things about your side hustle is that it's something that requires constant attention, constant management, and constant action. So whether or not you are the one doing that, or whether or not you have a team in place to do that, you have to make sure that you're constantly thinking about the next 2-3 steps ahead and not just about the immediate job that you're working on. So I think focus is one of the things. Having good people, a good team and good colleagues around really helps. Having your finances in order is a really important one. So again, usually if you're going to plan to be for a place in a year, there's a lot of cost that goes into that, in addition to the upfront accommodation, visas, and those sort of things, daily living, but also your business subscriptions, different subscriptions you pay for to, let's say, market yourself, and so forth. So I think it requires a lot of discipline, a lot of focus, but also to have a good support network around you, because unless you're with your family or with your partner or so forth, it can also be a very lonely journey. I remember earlier days before I was with my partner, it can be very lonely if you're traveling. Like, for example, I was in Thailand for 5 weeks while doing the research, and my time there, it was very exciting and so forth. I had a good time, but there was a lot of time also that I spent by myself. And while I like that personally, because I'm an introvert, I would describe myself as an introvert. I really enjoy time with myself. For the average person, that can be very difficult. And I remember I had a lot of digital nomads who I met there that were calling me just to do stuff, just to get out of the house. So I think it really takes a certain mindset to pursue a digital nomad life, because it's not all the glamour that you see. It's rewarding, but it's not all the glamour.
So that's really, really interesting, because you just mentioned some things there that I might not have even thought about on that journey. So I think that's going to be really valuable for folks who are kind of wanting to go there. And as we kind of start to wrap, if I kind of flip it, the core idea, or one of the ideas behind GigHR, is also for the corporate side and how they manage this evolving worker. So what are kind of the top 2 or 3 things that you've been sharing with leaders and corporate innovators and so on about how they need to adapt in this area?
One of the things that they need to really think about or really understand is gig workers aren't casual workers. They're workers. They're people that are also trying to make a living. So don't treat them like casual workers. If you want to get the best out of your gig worker, don't treat them as a casual worker. Treat them as a valued part of that organization for the time that they're with that company. So I think speaking to your gig worker, trying to find out actually what they want, what are the things that interest them, what are the barriers that they face when working with your company, are some of the essential things, because a lot of gig workers have spoken to us, and companies as well have spoken to us about projects that were pursued, and those projects have failed because the gig worker, let's say, didn't deliver on time, or they couldn't get in touch with the right person, or there was a different expectation, or no one was managing the project. So there really needs to be a conversation, and particularly at the very beginning, with regards to how that person will be working with the company, what are the resources they need, and how can we provide for them to give us the best results. But because they're casual and often not seen as a part of the organization, that support usually isn't provided for a lot of workers, which affects their ability to deliver on the job very well. So I think one, speaking to your gig workers and just really not treating them as casual throwaways is a big one.
No, that's really interesting because, I think as all companies around the world, particularly in the Caribbean, have started to embrace remote work, they've been challenged with, even for their full-time employees, how to manage them, and then far less, employees that they're bringing in for kind of a spot need or a short-term need. So that is really kind of powerful advice. So Rochelle, you've given us some clues as we've gone through around some of the, your big ambitions and so on. When you think about, building this, potentially global consultancy, I guess I want you to articulate what you hope for the organization in terms of impact or reach, et cetera, in the next sort of 3 to 5 years.
I want across the globe for people to know Crowd Potential, as that company that creates better working experiences for all types of workers. I want us to be known as the GigHR experts, which is why I call myself the GigHR expert. I want that to be more widely known and people to be very familiar with GigHR and to see more companies starting to implement a GigHR framework to really embrace different types of work. So one of the things I've heard a lot from companies is that they want to return to normal. They want to get everyone back in the office. And I've seen a lot of companies forcing this and trying to force people back in, regardless of seeing good results from their full-time staff, but also from working with gig workers. There's this clinging to the traditional mindset. But I think I really want to see individuals more and more embracing different types of work and that becoming the norm. So perhaps someone can work from the office a few days a week, but also make provisions for them to work from home the other times that or decide which positions might be able to be moved remotely, which positions might we get an independent contractor involved, or how can we work with, let's say, persons that might have left the company, how can we work with them in a contracting or independent entrepreneur sense? So I want to see people embracing different ways of working rather than sticking to 9 to 5 physical in office because it's what has always been done. That's no reason for continuing to do something because it's the way that you know. So I think I want Crowd Potential to really be the advocates and the persons that are facilitating that and helping companies across the globe to embrace and to really benefit and thrive from embracing different types of work and working experiences.
I love that. I think that's a great example of starting with why, having a big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah.
Dr. Rochelle Haines, I love what you're doing. You're repping for Barbados, for the Caribbean, and you're looking to push the envelope and push the world forward, which is exactly what innovators do. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join and be on the UpTick podcast, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to see you do great things and to finding ways to help you pull this off.
Yeah, thank you, Chike. And I love a lot of the work that you're doing as well in terms of promoting ideas and promoting the Caribbean. So thank you for having me on your podcast, and also keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, that was Dr. Rochelle Haines, born and raised in Barbados, operating out of the UK, and co-founder of Crowd Potential, a company that's leading thinking around GigHR and the blended workforce revolution. And just really showing what UpTick is all about, that even from our small islands in the Caribbean, we can create powerful ideas and intellectual property that can add value to businesses and organizations and people all around the world. Make sure you know the next time an episode of UpTick drops by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, share UpTick with a friend. Now, on behalf of Caribbean Ideas, this is Chike Farrell signing off. And remember, keep on ticking up.